Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I did think that I would give my final analysis on the Saul Canelo Alvarez and Dmitry Bivol fights on the fight review. And overall, I may not be able to talk as long in this video because I have been sick within the past week, actually without a COVID-19, so I may not be able to do videos as much next week, but we'll see what happens. And my voice is somewhat gone, but I thought that I would do a little bit of a fight review, at least for this. And of course, for those of you that did not hear the news, did not hear the surprising news, at least for a lot of people, I can't say that I'm shell shocked because I did know that Dmitry Bivol was a decent threat heading into this fight. But of course, it is a little bit surprising, and that is that Canelo Alvarez, that he ended up losing by unanimous decision in his career overall, actually for the first time. Now, of course, the other time that he has officially lost in his career, of course, was to that of Floyd Mayweather Jr., but, excuse me, even that was scored as a majority decision, which, in my view, of course, should have been scored a unanimous decision. But in this fight, it was scored a unanimous decision, I believe, on all three scorecards. They scored it, I believe, about 7 rounds to 5. I believe that that was even a little bit generous. I personally scored this fight for Dmitry Bivol, in my view, probably about not 9 rounds to 3, but about 8 rounds to 4. But there were certain scorecards out there to where they believe that maybe Dmitry Bivol could have even won as far as 9 rounds to 3. I would maybe see where the judges came from if you maybe gave Canelo Alvarez round one, because I personally gave Canelo Alvarez 4 rounds within the fight. But Canelo Alvarez clearly did lose this fight, in my view. And basically, what this means is a couple of things. This basically means, all in all, that first of all, that Canelo Alvarez, that in my view, he can no longer be the number one pound for pound king in all of boxing, at least at the current moment in time. And there may be certain people that disagree with that because they'll say, well, he was taking a challenge here, light heavyweight, yada, 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 yada. And that is true. Dmitry Bivol was, a decently bigger guy than that of Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, this was going to be, one of the biggest challenges of his career. So I understand certain people's perspectives, but Canelo Alvarez now is coming off of a loss. So what this means, I believe, all in all, for the sport of boxing, is that when we talk about the number one pound for pound king in all of boxing at the current moment in time, in my view, it comes to one of these four gentlemen. It's either going to be Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Alexander Usyk, or Tyson Fury. And most people, of course, would probably rank Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford within those top two candidates. I certainly would not have a problem with that whatsoever. Canelo would probably still be within my top 5 pound for pound just because of what he has accomplished. But I'm not really 100% shocked that Dmitry Bivol was able to win a fight against Canelo Alvarez. What shocked me was really how bad Canelo Alvarez really looked in this fight. And of course, depending on what channel, depending overall on what person you're going to watch, there's going to be a certain amount of people, that say, especially that of the, excuse me, especially that of the LDBC and new media channels, that of course will tell you, oh, well, see, I told you all along that Canelo Alvarez, he just has an overrated skill set. It's just his power. Well, for those of us that have seen Canelo Alvarez in action, and I've seen him within the past, 4 to 5 years, even longer than that. Canelo Alvarez is not just some kid, all in all, he's not just some boxer that overall has a very, very limited skill set and overall just can punch. He's not he's not overall just some Deontay Wilder or George Foreman, all right, or somewhat of a Rocky Marciano. He's not that kind of fighter. Now don't get me wrong. Has there been certain holes in Canelo Alvarez's game in the past? Perhaps, but I think the thing that really made Canelo Alvarez lose this fight the way that he did was that Canelo Alvarez looked dead dog tired really after the first 3 to 4 rounds of this fight. And I started noticing that very, very early on. And once I started noticing that Canelo Alvarez was breathing from his mouth very frequently in the early part of the fight, I knew that more than likely that something was up. I said, uh-oh, Canelo Alvarez, there's a possibility here that maybe he gained a little bit too much muscle mass here, maybe because he thought that was the only way that he was going to beat Bivol was by knocking him out. Because maybe he believed that his regular weights, that if he did not put on a little bit of extra weight or muscle mass, that he was not going to be able to compete with Dmitry Bivol's size or power. I understand the thinking, but at the end of the day, I think that unfortunately, when you mess with your body like that, that can, unfortunately lead you to losing fights. I think that Canelo Alvarez, that he would have been better not really gaining any weight whatsoever. And if there is going to be a rematch between these two gentlemen, between these two fighters, I think that it would be best for Canelo Alvarez to kind of be at that same point that he was at 168 pounds when he was against Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders, fighters like that. Now, certain people may say, well, you know what? Let's also be real with Dmitry Bivol. He was more skilled than those fighters. He also was more powerful. Maybe one could say that that was the main reason why Canelo Alvarez lost, not because he was not the best version of himself. Well, I've seen Canelo Alvarez against powerful opponents in the past, because a lot of these channels, once again, depending on who you watch, they'll try to, basically feed you this narrative to where they'll say, oh, well, Canelo, he doesn't handle, people with power and decent skills well. But that's not really the main reason why Canelo Alvarez lost this fight. Canelo lost this fight because it was very obvious that he was hoping that more than likely he was eventually either going to knock Dmitry Bivol out, or that Dmitry Bivol, that he was going to be somewhat afraid of his power to the point to where, he was not going to throw what he needed to throw. But Dmitry Bivol, to be quite honest with you, and I do have to congratulate him, he did put on a good performance, but I really don't even think Dmitry Bivol really put on an A-plus performance. I really was not even that overtly impressed with Bivol. I just thought that Canelo Alvarez looked so poor in this fight compared to his usual standards that was the reason why Dmitry Bivol ended up winning this fight, and winning this fight somewhat dominantly, at least somewhat, because Canelo Alvarez, once again, his stamina was nowhere near to be found whatsoever. And to be quite honest with you, this is probably the worst loss of his career, even compared to that of a Floyd Mayweather Jr., because at least Canelo Alvarez had certain moments in that fight to where, yes, he lost, pretty much, excuse me, he lost pretty much every single round of that fight against Floyd Mayweather Jr., but at the end of the day, at least Canelo Alvarez, you could tell that he was a young, upcoming star on the rise. If you were to take a look at Canelo Alvarez here, and if this was your first time watching Canelo Alvarez, you would think that Canelo Alvarez is not even a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. You would think that, all in all, that he's another Andrew Ruiz or something like that. Someone, all in all, who looked completely out of shape in this fight, at least when you talk about him breathing, heavy when it came down to it. Canelo, in my view, this is the worst that I've ever seen him look in a fight ever, even including, if we want to talk about the Arasani Lara or the Gennady Golovkin fights, the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fights, all those fights challenging. And of course, excuse me, and of course there is going to be a certain amount of people that state, well, Canelo has really lost a lot more times in his career. Well, the only fight, in my view, that I think that Canelo has definitively lost was the Floyd Mayweather Jr. one. Maybe the first Gennady Golovkin fight as well. But all the other ones I think that Canelo Alvarez pulled off. Canelo I still think is a great fighter. I still also believe him to be an all-time great fighter. But basically what this means now is that Canelo Alvarez, that he cannot rise up, at least unless he does some more within his career. He cannot rise up anymore within my ranks unless he defeats other opponents like that of a David Benavidez, a Jamal Charlo, maybe a Dmitry Bivol in the rematch, maybe overall a Artur Beterbiev later on, a Lunga Makabu, or, someone else. I'm trying to think all in all, is there someone that I'm missing here? There might be one that I'm missing. Maybe Demetrius Bobo-Andrade, I don't know. But Canelo Alvarez, the big question is about him, is where does he really go from here? Where does he really go from here? Does he rematch Dmitry Bivol? Does he face David Benavidez? Does he face Jamal Charlo? Does he face Gennady Triple G Golovkin? What does he really do from here? And I think that's going to be a very interesting question. What do I personally think that Canelo should do? I think next, in my view, well, from what I hear, he's probably going to have to face Gennady Golovkin anyway, because of that deal that he signed, but we'll see what happens. So, who knows? There could be a rematch close to Dmitry Bivol, or he could just go straight in with Gennady Golovkin, but who knows? Excuse me. But anyways, when it comes down to it, that's pretty much overall my fight review. Congratulations to Mr. Dmitry Bivol. I probably will be talking about it more when I can, unfortunately, within the next week. I don't know if I can because of my voice and the sickness, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Anyways, I thought that Canelo Alvarez, I thought that he looked very, 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 very poor, considering his regular standards. But it is what it is. I think that he added too much weight. I think all in all that it negatively affected him. And to be quite honest with you, he's even lucky in a few times in this fight that he was not stopped. But it is what it is. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.